Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my dearest uncle, auntie, dear brothers and sisters who have joined us on the show, and three very special guests, Arjun, Purva, Shivan. Arjun, Purva, Shivan, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Purva, you're on
Yep,
mute.
we can hear you.
Yeah, I can
Okay,
hear you too.
excellent, excellent. All of you are looking absolutely wonderful. So, as you just saw, we did the countdown for the 7:25 Elder Hour, and really, really nice to have all three of you on the show. We are currently streaming live on all Emoha community, on all our elders out there, and several other teams and other members who have joined us. So it's a matter of huge honor and privilege for me to present to you India's first Elders First Festival, and it's a festival dedicated to really the fantastic elders of this nation. My name is Samijit Roy, and I'm here today not as a CEO or a co-founder of Emoha Elder Care, but I'm here as a son. I'm here as a son, like millions of sons and daughters in India, and several thousands of them who work abroad, who want to do the best that we can for our parents. And a son who wants his parents to have a safe, secure, healthy, and active, engaged life. As we all know, in all the ups and downs of 2020 and 2021, as COVID created so much havoc in the country, it's become very clear to me and to millions of people in the country that the status quo for taking care of our parents and elders has to change. So 10 years from now, as we look back on today, each one of us will feel very special that we were part of a movement which made some fundamental changes in the way we look at our elders. And that small change is what we are calling as Elders Hour. So Arjun, Purva, Shivan, this is what we have created, which is called Elder Hour. And a lot of questions have been asked to me as to what is this Elder Hour? Why 7:25? What is this so special about 7:25 as a time, and why did we create a show at Elder Hour? So Elder Hour is for all elders and those who love them. It's a story which has Moh, which we call as Emoha. The center of the word Emoha has Moh, and it has Moh or Mohabbat for elders written all over it. I must have done more than 1,000 interviews over the last 10, 12 years with elders and their children. And let me share with you that, while a lot of children say that my parents need better healthcare, better emergency, better support services, can you guess what elders typically ask? Purva, Shivan, can you take a guess? What is it that elders typically ask? What is it that an elder wants?
Is it just time with the family?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You're
companionship.
absolutely correct. So, in all the research and all the, discussions that I have been part of, all they ask is one call in the day. And that's been the standard, response that I've seen cutting across elders across the country. And that's what Elder Hour in some ways signals. It's that 1 hour in a day where you can make a call. And we've all heard this thing about an apple a day keeps the doctor away. This is in a different way. That call a day keeps the doctor away because it keeps your parents energized, active, and so on. For all the viewers out there, Emoha, as you know, is India's leading elder care specialized company, taking care of thousands of elders across the country, leveraging technology, deep elder care expertise, and working with technology and solutions so that your parents can stay happy and safe and secure all the time. And Elder Hour, the way we are doing it, is a 10-week long festival of elders starting today, right up till 21st of August 2021, which is the World Senior Citizens Day. And during this 10-week festival, we will have Elder Hour sessions from Tuesdays to Saturdays, same time, 7:25 to 8:25. So we don't have to remember what time, what calendar. While you're having probably dinner at home, you can just keep your phone on, your iPad on, your laptop on, and enjoy the show and the programming that is happening during this time. And we'll get speakers, doctors, panelists, and also have some fun have some games, have festivals, have who knows, some very, very big celebrities as well in the show to share their stories about their parents and so on. And why 7:25 p.m.? My team members at Emoha has been asking me this question: why this time? So I'll be very honest. This time just popped in my mind some time back, and I think it's come straight from God. But on deeper checking, it also came out that this is a unique time. It's a unique time which is the transitioning between what typically people come back home and 6:37 you finish your work, and it's a transitioning between home and work, and it's also very interestingly the perfect time between the West Coast, the East Coast, the London time, the France time, the Dubai time, right up till Sydney. So it's so funny that 7:25 p.m. It's literally morning 7 o'clock exactly where Arjun, yourself, and Purva, you are in the United States. But it's at the same time the latest it is 11:55, which is Sydney. So whether it's in the East Coast or in Sydney, you're still at the same time that your mom and dad are having dinner at the table at 7:25 to 8:25 in the day. And I think that's something beautiful about much the same way as Earth Hour. It is the elderly hour which we are dedicating to the country. And I think it's for us, all of us, to make that pledge that we all, as a nation, as sons and daughters today, will make a commitment that we will ensure that every day we will make that one call. And to celebrate all of this, we will create a ritual. Emoha and all of us together will create a ritual so that we can enjoy this time with our parents, making their life more interesting. So, ladies and gentlemen, I feel very honored to have today with us three very, very special guests to inaugurate this festival, to inaugurate Emoha's Elders First Festival, but also to dedicate Elder Hour to the elders of this nation. So, I have with me somebody who needs no introduction, Mr. Arjun Malhotra. And all of you know him as the co-founder of HCL, the ex-chairman of Headstrong, the ex-CEO of TechSpan, an active supporter of various premium educational institutions such as ISB, the IIT Kharagpur, has been the co-chair of the Global Pan IIT Alumni Association, and has been on the board of governors of Doon School. Mr. Malhotra has also studied at the Doon School, Dehradun, at the IIT Kharagpur, and the Harvard Business School. Arjun has been the recipient of several awards, such as the Albert Einstein Technology Medal, and amongst others, the DQ Lifetime Achievement Award. But on a personal note, at Emoha, Arjun, you are our most energetic mentor with super lightning responses that we keep talking about. And you're always available for helping, always charging us with new energy. So thank you so much for taking time out for this. Thank you so much for inspiring us with your story. And today it's a super special feeling, not just to have Arjun, but also to have his two wonderful children, Shivan and Purva. Shivan, Purva, thank you so much for joining us, for taking time out today. I can tell you that you today are representing millions of sons and daughters out there who, much like myself, want to celebrate our parents out there. So I'd request Arjun to see if you could introduce your daughter, Purva, and if then Purva could introduce Shivan.
Yep, I'd be happy to do that. And thank you, Savanjeet. So Purva is our firstborn. And the name Purva is from Purvi, the breeze from the east, which is the first thing that happens when the day starts. And, Purva is, well, how should I put it? She's a very smart kid. She's done her master's in microbiology from Stanford. She did her undergraduate from, we were here in the US, from Santa Clara University. She's worked, in fact, when she was doing her master's, the Hindi teacher at Stanford went on leave, and she asked Purva if she could take the class for 6 weeks or so. And Purva, at the end of it, wrote a paper saying that it wasn't being taught the right way and that it should be taught in a different way. And many years later, when the Hindi teacher retired, Stanford got in touch with her and asked her to come in and teach Hindi at the university. So, I think she's one of the smartest people I know, and does a lot of reading, has been a homemaker for the last few years, getting up her two kids. They're now, one of them is a teenager, the other one's going to be a teenager in another year or so. And I think she's looking to get back to the workforce. We've been very lucky that between our two homes in Delhi and here in Silicon Valley, we live with Purva when we're here and the grandchildren. And when we are back in Delhi, my son Shiven is there and we live with him. So thank you, Purva, for being around. Thank you for being the person you are. And as I always say that as parents, we want to bring up children who are better than us, who are better human beings than us. And I think I can say that for both my children, that they are much better human beings than I am. At least I can speak for myself. Thank you. Thanks, Purva. Over to you.
Wow, Dad, that's a little difficult to follow. But thank you for saying that. It's funny, we don't often have the opportunity to talk about each other, so it's really nice to hear you say that. But it's always a little dangerous kind of introducing siblings. But my brother Shiven is here as well, and he and I are very close. I am the firstborn, as my dad says, but Shiven and I are very close in age, and also just close as brother and sister. And, I can list many achievements for Shiven. He has, lived and worked all over the globe. He's an avid photographer and hiker. But to me, the two things that really stand out about Shiven are his generous heart. And, it doesn't matter who it is. If someone asks him for help or if he knows someone needs help, he's always the first there. And the other outstanding thing about Shiven is he has this magical, witchy way with older people. And there isn't a single senior I know who doesn't go to my brother for tech support. I mean, even pressing the wrong button on the remote and then not knowing how to, fix it. Or even understanding what their doctor really meant. So that's my brother. And, I wouldn't have him any other way.
That's so sweet. Shivan, you will have to also introduce your sister in your own way, and that will be quite nice to complete the loop.
Sure. I'm just going to start my video actually.
Yes.
There, I think now everyone can see me. So,
Yes.
being second, you always, being the second child, you always try and, when you're young, you always try and compete with the older one, because you always want to be older than you are, get the access that they're getting, be where they are, which could be pretty annoying, because when you're younger, when you get older, you realize when you were younger that there are things you really do want to do alone without your sibling always just being around there all the time. But as Pura said, as we got older, we've gotten very close. To me, there are two people who, if I have to say, I look up to in terms of above pretty much everyone else. The three people, they happen to be actually Dad and Purva in terms of when I look at intelligence. In terms of knowledge and being able to go to them for questions. I look at my mom for emotional intelligence. That's. But Purva's, she always amazes me. The ability for her. Papa said that she ended up teaching Hindi. What he didn't end up mentioning was that she also wrote the book and the workbooks on which, because she didn't like the ones that were there, so she actually wrote them, and that became the curriculum in Stanford. And I don't know if that's true, but I'm pretty sure that even now those are the ones that are being used. And I got to go to her class once, and I really got to see you see your siblings, your family, you see them in a very different way. You don't see them at work normally, right? So you don't see it. Their work self is a very different being, and how people react to them at work is very different. I still remember the one time I went as a substitute teacher for Purva, and she said, can you just take the class? It was easy that day. We were just showing a movie, Ye Dil Chahta Hai. I still remember it. But everyone talked about, how Purva explained this and Purva explained that about how it works, and this in Hindi and that in Hindi. And I thought, I'm really glad she explained it, because I really wouldn't be able to. So I'm just glad we're seeing the movie today. So it was, so if I can say something about my sister, she said, I have a big heart. So does she. She's been an amazing sibling. And I've got to say, the thing which I've learned to appreciate the most about her is the way she's brought up her two kids. I mean, there are lots of places you can say people can be selfish, they can give, they can have different parts of their personalities, but the one place where you see people being truly selfless is when they be parents, right? And I've seen her with my nephew and niece, and it's there are times I feel for her because it's hard, but she's just done an amazing job. And as Dad mentioned, it's now been 14 years. The older one is 14, about to be just 14 just in a few days. So it's that's the best compliment I can give her.
Fantastic. Isn't it so sweet? Isn't it so sweet to see all three of you? And I have to mention that I've had the privilege to meet Kiran, and I know she's not here in this show right now because I've promised that we'll do a dedicated show with Kiran again. But I think that, the power of having Purva yourself as the daughter, and, by definition, having a daughter at home myself, I know that there is a certain amount of additional bias that happens, that the daughters are always the more preferred one, compared to the son. When we created the Emoha brand, it is modeled around a daughter, and we have our daughters, who are the virtual daughters, call up on the elder every day to check on for them. So, one of the things that we noticed is the beautiful bond that all of you share, the bond between Arjun, yourself, and Purva, and Shivan, and the family. So I want to ask this question to Arjun, and just to kind of start the conversation, that, we always say that behind every successful man, there is a woman, or behind a successful woman, there is a man. But it's also true at Emoha, we believe that behind a successful person, there is some elder. There is somebody out there, somebody who was taking care, much the same way as Purva is taking care of her children, of her two children so beautifully, grooming them, giving them values and so on. And tomorrow, Purva's children will do something fascinating in the world. Arjun, over to you. Let us know, who were these elders in your life? I've read so much about your grandparents and your maternal grandparent and your mom and your dad. Please share with us. Please share with us. We would love to know the love that you have for your parents and grandparents who live inside you and who live through you and through your eyes. Over to you, Arjun.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I've got to give a little bit of my
Yes.
life story. So I was born in Calcutta, and my maternal grandparents lived in Calcutta for about 40 years. They moved from Punjab. Actually, both my parents from refugee families. My mother's family came from Lahore and Gujranwala in Punjab, and but they lived in Calcutta since the early 1900s. My father's family came from Burma. They came across to India during the war. A lot of them trekked in. My dad was in the army. There were 5 brothers, all 5 were in the army. My mother's family came, a lot of them came out of Pakistan. And because my grandfather, maternal grandfather, my Nana was in Calcutta, he was the sort of the person who supported them initially. So technically, I was born post-independence. And so when I grew up in Calcutta, my mother was a medical doctor from Calcutta Medical College. She was working, my dad was in the army, they were working. So I spent a lot of my initial time as a child and, coming back from school with my maternal grandparents. And my grandfather was a fairly well-known scientist. In fact, if anyone in fisheries, they would know him, Dr. Sundarlal Hora, S.L. Hora. He was director of the Indian Museum when I was young. And so I spent between Kid Street and Southern Street, for those of you who know Calcutta. So I spent a lot of time roaming around the museum. Basically, you're the director's grandson, and so all the darwans and all really take care of you. And I basically learned a lot from him. I mean, he used to go for a walk around Victoria Memorial in the morning, I used to hold his finger and walk with him. And while he'd be discussing, I guess, scientific stuff or whatever he was talking to his colleagues or friends, he would give me my 2 plus 3, 5 plus 8, So I learned my mental math when I was a kid. So when I went to kindergarten and the teacher would write the sum on the board and draw the two lines, I would give her the answer before she could finish drawing the two lines for the answer. And so I used to get thrown out of the math class as a disruptive influence and went to Bible knowledge in Loreto Convent, Calcutta. I still remember that. Uh, of course, my nani, my maternal grandmother, she thought the sun rose and set with me. So, it was unbelievable. I could do no wrong in her eyes. I mean, I just don't know how to describe it. But if you have someone who gives you that kind of support, it's quite amazing. But on the other side, she did have an expectation. My grandfather was a gold medalist from Government College, Lahore. And I believe he'd done very well in his academics. And my grandmother was, she was a sixth class, but you would never, I mean, if you didn't know that, you wouldn't believe it. But she was, we call it pressure today. She was quite clear that, she expected me to live up to that quote unquote academic standard. It's actually very difficult to do. And I decided I wanted not just to focus on academics, but to, play some games, do some other stuff, try and be a quote unquote and all.
I was reading this story that she wanted you to be first in the class all the time, and you came back and said that I'll come within the first top 2, top 3, but I'll also come first in the sports and everything else. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I just decided. See, my dad was a sportsman also. He played soccer for Burma, football for Burma when he was a teenager. And then he played for Eastern Command in Calcutta First Division, And so, I also wanted to play some sports. And I did, doing that way is very good. They force you to play games. And so I played a number of things, basketball, cricket, etc., etc. And so I just thought that's what I wanted to do. I also wanted to act in plays and debate. So I was trying to do everything, live my full student life, as they say. And it worked out well for me because we have a medal a gold medal in IIT Kharagpur for, you've got to be in the top 10% of your class in academics. And then you've got to have all-round kind of exposure and activities. It's called the Dr. B.C. Roy Gold Medal, which is what I got, and which is really, in fact, for my grandmother, I had arrived when I got the gold medal. She didn't know what the gold medal was for, but as long as it was a gold medal, it was, yes, you were carrying on the quote unquote the family tradition, if I use that term. But yeah, and so, I lived with them when I was young. Then I came to be after my grandfather passed away, and he passed away fairly early. I was 7 years old. Mm-hmm. We came to Delhi, and my dad was always in the army. My mother was the one who was somewhat fixed. She worked at Lady Harding Medical College, then Maulana Azad Medical College, and we were staying on campus. My dad was always, somewhere or the other. Whether it was the Chinese War in '62, he was in the front, etc., etc. So then my mother she got a Ford Foundation fellowship to come to the Harvard School of Public Health for some studies, and my dad was in the front. And so both the kids, me and my sister, were both sent to boarding schools. I went to Doon. When I came back, they couldn't afford 2 children in boarding schools. My sister was 3 years younger. So she got pulled to a day school in Delhi. I was too close to my senior Cambridge. So I finished at Doon. But during the period my mother was away and my father was away, I lived with my grandmother, at least when I came home for the holidays. And so again, so I was just very close. I think what I learned from my grandfather was, what I really learned from him was, with his busy schedule, he always had time for me when I was a child. He actually, he had one of those roller desks which have 150 little drawers, those old work desks that people had. And I used to collect stamps, which he encouraged me. And so one drawer in that desk was my drawer. And he'd put all the stamps.
Wow.
I'd go, whenever, once a day or once a few days, pick up the stamps and then work with them. So I remember that. And of course, my mother and father have always been, I really admired my mother for what she was doing, the work she was doing. She was in public health. So I've seen the National Malaria Eradication Program. I've gone and stayed with her at rural health centers in Singroor in Bengal and other places and stuff like that. And I've also gone with my dad to camps, army messes, whenever I got time or I got, had a holiday that I could go and spend some time with him. And, I basically learned, in our time, Nehru, work is worship, and that sort of was the motto. So I've also learned that, no matter how smart you think you are, unless you put in, that 99% perspiration, as Einstein said, it's not going to happen. And so, I look back and there's a lot of things. I mean, what you learn is your parents, your grandparents, and from your teachers. And that's what, I think both in school and in college. And in fact, I'll give you a small incident from school. So I used to, as I mentioned, I used to always be good at math. And, we used to do, when we did our math classes in school, I would notice that our teacher, a gentleman called O.P. Malhotra, who wrote a number of books in CBSE syllabus in those days, he used to leave the class, give the test, leave the class and go away. And so lots of people would cheat. And, sometimes you make a careless mistake and you feel bad because there are people who have cheated and copied from each other and they get more marks than you. So after a few months, when we got to know him a little better, one day I asked him, I said, sir, you leave the class after giving a test. Aren't you worried that people will cheat? And so he looked at me and he said, who are they cheating? And, I've never forgotten that. Because ultimately you're cheating yourself by doing that. So you get these pearls of wisdom. You get them from teachers who you admire. It's just amazing. And I had a number of very, very influential teachers both at Doon as well as at IIT Kharagpur. And I just decided that it's part of our, how should I put it? It's part of what our culture, that we have to respect our teachers. And so when I did make a little bit of money, courtesy HCL, I actually have donated 2 schools, a school for telecommunications, which I named after Professor G.S. Sanyal, and a Center for Innovation at IIT Kharagpur, which I named after Professor M.N. Faruqi, who were 2 of my teachers when I was at Kharagpur. So, yeah.
That's so nice, Arjun. And I think, in everything that you say, I see so much of your mentioning your grandparents, your mom, your dad. I think when I'm trying to see this, how this has got passed through the generation, maybe Purva and Shivan could fill in and say how Arjun, as the 7-year-old whose grandfather was holding his hand and walking through the bylanes of Calcutta, to Arjun, the grandparent, spending time with grandchildren. How is that transitioning, Purva? How do you see that transitioning from the grandchild of yesteryear to the grandparent now?
It's interesting. When I was growing up, Papa used to be traveling a lot. And though growing up, I never thought it was strange because that was the only life I knew. But as I grew a little older, I realized that that's not how everyone's parents are, right? Papa used to travel for work, maybe 20 days in the month. We would see him very little. Of course, our interactions were very meaningful, but in terms of time, it was not that much for both Shiven and me. But I see Papa with my children, and it's very different. right? I mean, he will take time out to interact with them. In fact, my son has high functioning autism. He's extremely bright, but he definitely has limitations, social limitations. And Papa will, he really identifies with my dad, and so it's really nice to see that. Shiven and I were lucky because we grew up not just with our grandparents and both sets of grandparents. We lived with one and we were 5 minutes away from the other. But we even grew up with our great grandmother in the house for a long time, till she passed away. And so we really benefited from just having all these older people
Parents.
to have their hands on
Yeah.
our head and kind of help us as we were growing up. And my grandparents became friends over time as I grew.
Right.
But I think it's important to spend time. I think time is
Yeah.
the key, because
Yeah.
you need to find time to interact and grow together and learn together.
Yeah, and
That
accept some of the feedbacks and life lessons that will come your way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we as younger people, especially this generation, they're growing up with a screen in front of them. So there's, kind of a shield between us and people. My grandparents, my parents didn't grow up like that. I think their understanding of the world is different and in some ways deeper, maybe,
Right.
than what my kids are getting on their own. So for me, I think it's even more important that my kids spend
Right.
time with the older generation.
Perfect. Shivan, what do you have to say? You've also seen, when you were growing up, whether it is Arjun, whether it is, your grandparents, what do you see, which has gone inside your veins, which has come from parents and grandparents?
So, so I'll add one thing to what Purva said, which is just as an anecdote. When my nephew was born, um, one day Dad actually was back from work before 5 p.m. I'm not saying he left work at 5 p.m. He was back. So I actually for a second thought he was sick. Uh, but he was home to spend time with me, which is very nice to see. I mean, I joked with him a little bit at the door, but before I let him into the house, I was there at that time in the US, and but it was really amazing to see. I mean, as Pura said, that Papa was traveling for work when we were young, and you know, the relationship I've always been told, and I can see is the grandchildren to grandparents is a totally different relationship than parents to children. Now, on that note, Pura and I spent a lot of time with our grandparents because we lived
Correct.
together with my Dada and Dadi, and my Nana and Nani were around the corner in Defense Colony, which is not far, which is very close to where we live. So we saw them all the time, and so both our parents were working. So we ended up spending a lot of time between the day, because by the time we were born, my grandfather was retired. Um, so he was actually home, and we spent a lot of time with all four of them. So our bond with them was very special, because it wasn't that you saw them once in a while or you saw them in the house just when you're going to visit grandparents. To us, as Pura said, they became friends. And my nana used to say that when someone grows as tall as you, or their foot size becomes as big as yours, they become your friends. And I happened to get a growth spurt when I was very young, and my feet also grew. So he, at a very young age, actually imparted knowledge to me, in a way, like a friend, someone like a colleague, a friend, things that I still actually use when I look back and see what he had said. He was a grandparent. He was the only grandparent between the four that saw us as that let us be equal. The others still saw us as
Yeah.
grandchildren, and so it was. The experience that he gave was a little different. And I mean, we appreciated all of them, but it was. You still remember some of the things. I still use some of the things he said and explained to me even today. So.
So nice. And I think this is exactly where we feel, for example, that we sometimes don't in our day-to-day works we don't truly get the amount of inheritance that we get from our parents, from our grandparents, and it's almost like we are reliving our grandparents through us, right? So Arjun, as you moved from education to entrepreneurship, tell us something more about how your parents and your grandparents played an influence while you took some dramatic steps in the early days, and uncharted territories that you took on. How were your parents' reaction? How did your mom, your dad, and everybody in the family react to the young Arjun Malhotra wanting to start on his own and change the world?
So, no one in the family had ever done quote unquote business, if I use that term. Everyone was either teacher, doctor, scientist, whatever. They came from that background. So initially, my parents were always supportive. They always said, if that's what you want to do, please go ahead. Uh, and I felt that both of them were earning, my wife was earning. So it would just be a dampness in the lifestyle a little bit with my salary not coming in. And I felt that a year later, 2 years later, if it didn't work out when we started HCL, I could always go back and find a job. But, my uncles and aunts thought I was crazy. They thought leaving, I was with DCM, I joined them as a senior management trainee. DCM was the fourth largest company in the country at that time. Everyone thought I'm mad, I'm leaving a stable job with a big company where a career, you could build a good career as an executive. They just thought I was crazy. What also happened was when we had to put in our equity and my share was 50,000 rupees, I didn't have the money. I had only 35,000. So this is all I'd borrowed, mine, my mother's, my dad's. So I asked my mother if she'd give me a loan from her provident fund for the balance. And she said no, she'll give me whatever's in the bank, but she wasn't going to touch her provident fund, which I now appreciate. And so I had to go to a friend of mine from IIT who comes from a business family and borrow the money from him to put my investment in the company. And that's one nice thing about friends is when the company did well, I offered him the shares or the money, and he with interest, and he got really upset. He said, "Just give me my money back. I don't want any interest. I don't want any shares." And and the company was worth
That's
a
so
fair
sweet.
amount at that time. So that's friends. But yeah, that's what happened. And what happened is 2, 3 years later, when the company started doing well, all the naysayers, all the uncles and aunts and grand aunts and whatever grand uncles who'd said you shouldn't do it took credit for saying, "See, we told you you'd be able to do it," kind of thing. So that happens, I think, in most families. It's normal. What my grandmother did was she offered us her Barsati in Golf Links, where she lived, to open our office, and that's where we started. And we grew to a point where we used to roll up her bedrooms and make them offices, and she would act like a receptionist. So if someone came to visit and your earlier meeting was
Wow.
still going on, she would have them sit in the drawing room, have talk to them, give them tea or whatever. uh, and in fact, I feel bad that when we shifted our office, she mentally deteriorated very quickly after that. And I think I learned from there is that, look, as long as you keep busy, you'll stay young and you'll stay healthy, right? Physically and mentally. And so I've decided I'm not going to retire. And, my motivation is I feel I've been asked this a number of times. And so I feel as long as I can create jobs in India, I think I have a duty. And so I will keep doing that. And I don't think I can see myself retiring because the industry I'm in, the IT industry, it's becoming a part of infrastructure. I mean,
Correct.
healthcare, everything is dependent. Emoha, whatever you do, you'll have some platform at the back, which is IT
Correct.
dependent, IT based, on which you run the whole thing to make it
Correct.
efficient. And so, yeah, and so I think, and that's what I plan to do. I mean, unless I'm physically disabled and I can't do it, or I'm mentally disabled and I can't do it, and that's what I'm doing right now. which is why I do this travel much against. In fact, right now I'm planning to come to India sometime in August, and Purva's on my case every day, saying you can't, etc. And I'm saying let's wait and see how things go. If things are getting better as they are right now and stay that way, then I will probably come into India. I do need to come in because we're doing a lot of work on telemedicine and stuff, where we're getting a lot of states who are starting to want us to go to all their villages. In fact, we are doing 25,000 villages in Bihar right now. I want to make sure that we do it properly and work with the company to ensure that it gets done. So yeah.
So Arjun, what is the secret of this energy? A lot of our elders and we have wonderful elders who who keep reinventing themselves every couple of years and do interesting things. But on behalf of all the elders that we have in our community and in the country, Arjun, share the secret. Share the secret so that other elders in the country also can keep reinventing and having the kind of energy and boost that you have. But do share with elders, what keeps you energized and active and all the time doing so much new interesting things, every day.
I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
I have the
Yes,
answer.
Purva, go ahead.
It's
Go
his
ahead,
amazing
Purva.
family. It's his amazing family. That's what it is. That's the secret. Nothing else. That's it. Right? He has
Yeah.
to have an amazing and supportive family to do that, right, Dad?
Yeah, true. Absolutely. That's an important part. But I think on a individual level, when you run long distance, you always get tired at a certain point and you got to push yourself mentally to be able to do it. Obviously, not to a point where you'll collapse, but try and push yourself a little more than what you did earlier. So that, it's like when I used to run cross country at Dune, you always try to improve your timings on the same course. And, mentally, you have to push yourself. That's the only way you can do it. And I think that's what you've got to do when you want to reinvent yourself and stuff. And there has to be that little bit of inquisitiveness. I never looked at the whole medical field at all. My mother was a doctor. My wife is a nutritionist. I thought, hey, I don't have to do this. I can spend my mental cycles on something else. And today, 80% of my time is working with technology in healthcare, in trying to see how we can improve outcomes for the economically underprivileged in India with the shortage of doctors that we have. And so I'm learning more about healthcare and today genetics and that whole part of the life sciences, part of the business that I actually thought and I stayed away from when I was younger. It's also like, when I started working, I said I won't look at finance and accounts because there's specialists who look at that. Someone else will take care of it. But as you get into running a company, you realize more and more that you need to understand finance and accounts. And, you need to actually become somewhat knowledgeable about it. You can't not know very much and just depend on someone else who's an expert. You should know enough to be able to question them so that you get clarity on what's going on. And so I think part of it is also a learning experience. I also believe a lot of people I meet don't use their common sense. And I think that's probably the most important ingredient of trying to, just look at anything you do and see how you can improve it. I try to look at everything, I try to look at my morning routine and say, hey, it takes me half an hour to brush my teeth, shave, have a shower, and get ready. Can I make it 25 minutes? Where can I optimize it a little more? And you start thinking like that, ultimately, there's so many things you can change and improve in the world. There's never a dull moment. There's so many people you can help. Not all of them want your help. Some of them aggressively don't want it. But all your job is to keep trying. That's all you can do. So I think that's what keeps me going.
Absolutely. And Arjun, what would be your advice for the millennials, the large number of young population in the country, many of whom are staying in Boston, and I know that Today, for example, the last 2 months has been extremely painful for a lot of elders and their children who are abroad with travel bans and everything. We've seen so many situations at Emoha where children are abroad and they are working for IT companies, for financial industries, and their parents are in India, and the struggle that keeps going on between them. What is your advice? You also been in the same situation, for a lot part of your career, where you were mentioning about how the family was being taken care of. What is your advice of this balance between taking care of elders and so on while you are, pretty much abroad? How do you see a son and daughter today coping up with all of this?
So, let me put it this way. I had the same problem. Unfortunately, my mother went sort of instantaneously. Purva was there staying with my parents at that time, and so I had to just fly down for her funeral, basically. But my father was sick for a fairly long time, and he was very clear that he didn't want to go on dialysis, and he didn't want any of that to be done. And so we knew he was going, and we all decided that we would take 6 weeks off and become his primary caregiver. So all of us, Purva took time off from college, Shiven took time off from his work, I took some time off and went to India. My wife ended up being the last person there, and she spent more than 6 weeks with him. But what you don't want is to ever feel that you could do it and you feel guilty the rest of your life that you didn't spend that time with them. And just spending time with parents is so important. I know a lot of my friends whose parents were in India. They were here. Unfortunately, they weren't Zoom, and you couldn't call. Calling was expensive. But once you got internet type calling, and there were different schemes that came up. It's like my mother-in-law. She wouldn't talk to my wife or to me because she said it's too expensive. And people like my generation also, we've been brought up in that environment where money was not freely available. You middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, you were still tight. But I gave her a 1H phone and I told her it's free because you had to pay a fixed fee, and you could talk as much as you like. After that, she would call twice a day. So
Oh, nice.
we have to accept that the way my parents would never fly first class. Even if I told them I'll buy you the ticket and all, they said no. So once I had miles, so I told them it's free, it's on miles, and they came here. They flew first class, and my dad told me, it's the first time I've been able to sleep on a plane. So it's
sweet.
that part of life. I think what kids have to do today is just try and spend as much time as they can with their parents. If they can't physically go and spend the time, try and at least talk to them once or twice a day. It doesn't cost anything today. And so today you have no excuse. In fact, I would encourage them to get a smartphone and do, talk, whether it's on WhatsApp or whatever, and just interact with them. Just talk about what you're doing. I think that is very important for both them and for their parents. We get busy in our rat race. We are in transactions. But you have to find that time for yourself. You go to the gym. You do a lot of things that you do for yourself. You can easily find that time. There's just no. You just have to make sure. Otherwise, if something happens to them, and you always wanted to go and talk to them or meet them, you'll never forgive yourself for the rest of your life. And so I don't think that's
So true.
So I don't think you
and Arjun, I think this is central to the whole philosophy of creating this concept of elder hour. It doesn't mean you can't call them, throughout the day, but like all things, it just is that little bit of a tip in your mind that you could set a notification in your smartphone for that one little call that you can do at 7:25 every day. But just to kind of shift this gear a little bit, Purva, Shivan, what are your worries? What are your when you think about your dad and mom, and there's so many times that Arjun has been so busy traveling across the world, doing so many things. And Shivan, why don't you go ahead and just share when you think of your dad and your mom, and their current life and occupation and all the things. What are thoughts in your mind? How do you look at their concerns, and how do you see addressing some of those things?
So I'll give you some background before I tell you. So um, I think the time that I've seen my dad most relaxed ever is when he was with his group, that his cohort from Harvard. So when he went to Harvard Business School, his cohort. Now, because he went and he was very young, out of the group, he's the youngest. He and mom are the youngest, the kids, the children of the group, really. And that group traveled every 1 or 2 years somewhere around the world. They organized a month where they would go somewhere around the world and they'd explore that area. They've gone through lots of places from South Africa to Australia. I mean, they were able to do it, so they went. But what I found at that time was that was the time I found my parents didn't have kids, didn't have parents. I mean, now of course my grandparents are no longer there, but didn't have parents. They could just, there were no expectations from anyone in that group from them in any other way except that they should have fun. And I found that they did. I really hope, because they were the youngest, I hope as they get older, they're able to find a group like that where they can go and travel and, get that time away from us, away from the grandkids, because all of us, we love our parents, we want them to do things, but we sometimes want them to do things a little bit our way. We're also adults, so there'll always be this dichotomy between wanting to spend time and wanting to spend time the way we want them to spend time, right? I mean, so they'll be able to go and spend time the way they want to, and I'm hoping that they find that. That's it. I think that dad, like my grandmother, my dadi, was getting ready for work the day she died. She was actually still working. So dad's not going to retire, which keeps him going. And so I think that's great. So this is the one thing which I hope for him.
So nice. And I must say this, that the program that we do, which is more than 1,000 programs done over the last 15 months, called Emoha TV, is where elders across the country come together, make friends. When you are an 89-year-old and an 88-year-old, you're no longer an 88-year-old or an 89-year-old. You're all friends. And there is a charm of being at the same peers. The jokes are similar, the political news is similar, the discourse is similar, and you find that all you have to do is to just be a catalyst in that discussion, and suddenly the room is full of energy and nostalgia and songs from the 60s and 50s and so on. So it makes a lot of difference to have a community feeling, a feeling where people can understand you, people can, they can relate with you, and they can give you the importance that sometimes elders don't have. So what we'll do is we have a couple of minutes left. As I promised, we'll do a small, a quick round of questions, which we'll ask to Purva and Shivin, Arjun, and these are questions directed to you, Arjun. So we will get to know a little bit more about yourself through these questions. Are we ready? Are we ready for the question?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay. So. Okay, so can you see the spin the wheel? This is something that we do all the time. And we have a lot of our elders and Emoha TV programs around games and around, Shero Shairi and Antakshari, which keeps them busy every day. So who wants to go first? Is it Purva or is it Shivin?
I'll go.
Okay.
Okay.
So
let's see.
it's a good question.
You know this one.
Arjun, you have to keep quiet. Arjun, you have to keep quiet. This is Shivan's moment of truth.
Papa, when there are movies he's seen like, I don't know, 17 times, 20 times. Sholay was the movie.
32
was it Sholay?
Times. No, 32 times.
32. I'm forgetting this. I remember the dialogue. I'm just forgetting the name of the movie. I'm actually bad with Hindi movies.
Okay,
so
you can say the dialogue. You can say the dialogue, Shivan. I think that will be interesting.
No, I can't, because the dialogue was not great. I mean, in terms of In older company, it's a little harder to say the dialogue, but
Oh,
it was a great dialogue in the movie where
Okay.
they talked about they talked about the villain in a very derogatory way, but in a very nice way. I mean, you're talking about competition. Puru, I'll let you say.
it's Yado Ki Barat.
Yadav ki Baat.
And if there's anything that was on my dad's bucket list, it was that my mom would sing his favorite song to him, and that was Chura Liya Hai. So yeah, definitely
Oh,
Yado Ki
wow.
Barat. And he saw it 32 times in a row in a movie theater.
Is that a favorite
By
song
the
of
way, that
Arjun?
was while
Chura
he was
Liya
still
Hai?
while he was working,
Yeah.
while they were setting up HCL. I mean, you got to do the timing. So they still managed to see it 32
So
times. So
what we did was every time we booked an order, we would go and see the movie. So it was a kind of a company gang movie that was part of
Wow.
celebrating you getting an order when you're a startup. Orders are important because they get you business. So that's why we saw it so often.
Very nice. Okay, that's nice. And Arjun, do you agree that that is the movie?
Yes, yes. I
Very
still love
nice.
it. I mean, the dialogue that Shivain is feeling shy about is when when Dharmendra catches this guy, they're running on a railway track, and the track changes, and his foot gets caught between that rails, and Dharmendra is going to stab him with a knife, and suddenly he hears a train coming, and the train is on that track, so he knows the train is going to kill this guy. So he says, "Wo dekh kutte, teri maut aa rahi hai."
Amma,
Kind of
you're
thing.
not supposed to say that.
yeah, the whole point is I was trying not to not to say.
But the way he
But well
said
said.
it, as I always say, the way he said "ye dekh, wo dekh kutte" or whatever,
Yes.
that if someone had said it to me that way, I'd go check my heredity and say, this guy is being so vehement about it. Maybe he means it really. But yeah, it
That's
was a
so
great
sweet.
movie.
And Arjun, having seen some of your interviews, I must say this. I think one of the secrets which I it seems to me, and Shiven and Purva will have to correct me if that is the right insight, is Arjun's sense of humor. I think there is a lot of very deep sense of humor which is there, which perhaps is also the drive and the energy which keeps going. Is that right? Is that
Completely. My dad used to pun constantly, just constantly, and my brother, and now my husband. And it's so funny. Everyone in the family says that I've been influenced by my father. So I actually married someone who puns as well. So in our family, half the time, my mom and I have our ears closed because it's just too much, joking and punning around.
You're
I
forgetting
I
Veer,
heard.
my nephew also.
Yep.
So
So I've
sweet.
got to tell you why. And, so I come from a family where there's high blood pressure on both sides, hypertension. So, and I used to have a very short temper when I was a kid. So my mother sat me down one day and said, "Look, it's up to you, but you come with this genetic pool that's not very good from a high blood pressure point of view. And if you start losing your temper, it's only going to make it worse. So you got to find a way to control your temper." And so the standard thing is count till 10. And, I tried that didn't work. And then I found out that if I look at the humorous side of a situation where I'm going to lose my temper, two things happen. Is I pass a quasi sarcastic humorous comment. No one knows whether I'm being sarcastic or I'm joking. So everyone laughs because it's polite to do that, but the message gets across. And so I
Correct.
found that so I just changed my whole psyche to look at the humorous side of things when I don't like something or I get upset about something. And I find that
So
it works
true.
for me and it works for the situation.
So true. So true. In fact, there is a detailed study that had got done about emotional wellness and the impact of COVID, for example, on youngsters versus the impact of COVID on elders, and the fact that elders are able to they've seen so much life and things that they're able to manage different type of situations and be emotionally acceptable compared to youngsters who are not able to take it. And that's the power of the wonderful elders, and something that otherwise have this notion that Umar ho gayi hai, this ageism that comes in. There is nothing called age. To become an elder is such a wonderful thing, and to celebrate being an elder is an even wonderful thing. And therefore, one should just enjoy the fact that now you have time on your hand, you have so many things that you can do, and you have all the knowledge, attention, and hopefully money as well to be able to enjoy the time properly. So Purva, we're going to be doing one round of spin the game with you as well.
Okay.
And while I'm hoping that it would end up at that a dad joke. So there's one of the ones that we put this, which is the dad joke. Let's see. And Arjun is a mathematician, so statistically speaking, there is a 1/12 possibility that it will hit that number. So let's see if we are at that 1/12 possibility.
That's a difficult one. I'm now in my mid 40s. I have had a lot of time to kind of just like dad for who he is. And so honestly, I wouldn't change anything because this is my father and this is how I know him. So it's yeah, I honestly would not change anything.
So sweet. So sweet.
We are also getting paid for the
so
answer.
Nice.
You know that, right?
No, I'm honestly saying that. I'm not joking. No jokes here.
No. As you get older, you learn that your parents are just like you. They have their flaws. They have their positives. And they're human beings. And you start learning to appreciate them for who they are. I last year had an event that I went through. I went through a life-changing event last year, and I think we all came to it shakes you a little bit, but you also get to appreciate your family in a different way during that. Once that happens, I'm not suggesting others should have it, but don't wait for one either to be able to appreciate your family.
No, but I think it's the other way around. I think as you become older, in many ways, you become a lot like your parents. I'm going to what you say. I think it's not them becoming like us. I think it's us realizing that we are a lot like them because we've been influenced so much by what you see growing up. That eventually it's strange. You spend so much of your life kind of thinking you want to be different, and ultimately you realize there's many things that you think is right in the way you were raised. So yeah, it's I think you just
which is kind of the cycle of it's a cycle of life concept. So I know we are closing on the hour, but would love to hear, Arjun, any closing thoughts from yourself on I know that there's so much that you've done. There's so much, so many organizations you've started. What is that one thing that you still want to do, and which keeps you kicking, and that I need to do this soon? And let's see if all of us can, if all of us can constitute together between Purva, Shiven, and all Emoha's resources, and make sure that Arjun gets what he wants.
I'm just trying to make sure that right now I would like everyone in India, whether you're in a remote village or wherever you are, to be able to consult with a doctor when you want at an affordable price. And so that's really what I'm looking at, is how A and B, for people who have chronic issues, we should be able to monitor them. In the sense that today, if you have a heart issue, you go to the doctor, he says, come to me after 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, unless you have an emergency, he has no idea what happened, what your vitals were, how your heart behaved or whatever, right? He'll do a test when you go back, which is that instant. Whereas actually, if I was able to monitor and he could see that and see over 6 weeks how your vitals behave, the ability for him to come back to you with a better diagnosis and better treatment and be far more effective. And really, that's what today
Right.
technology allows me to do that. Technology lets me do it.
Right.
And that's really what I want to do. I
Right.
want to try and work with technology, work with companies that have that technology that allow me to do that. I mean, it's like what C.K. Prahlad said. It's the bottom of the pyramid. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, right now we are doing it for 25, 30 rupees a transaction. Every time you want to consult with the doctor, that's what it sort of costs you. Right, depends on the doctor. Obviously, not all doctors come at that price. But yeah, and so it'll also do a lot of preventive rather than curative work, so that the load on the hospitals will go down, especially from the rural areas. And it'll save them a lot of money because they don't have to travel to the town. They don't have to spend a night there. They don't have to come with a companion, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think there's no reason why we can't do it in India. I just think it's something we should do. You know, I mean, I think it's a fundamental right that we should give our people, especially in India. I think all over the world, but especially in India, because I think, and I've been to rural health camps, and I've been to, you know, I've grown up in some of them, and it's unfortunate that in the 40, 50, 60 years, very little has changed for them, which is a real pity. And so we should make that change. We have the technology.
Certainly, Arjun, from my discussions with yourself on how much technology can change healthcare, change elder care, being able to stream the best quality, support system, the fact that 170 lives of elders got saved just inside Emoha. Imagine, 100 such startups taking care of elders and so on. And it is this energy and this enthusiasm which will keep us all going. So on that note, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate Arjun, Shiven, Purva for really opening up. It's always, we always see the co-founder of HCL, but behind the co-founder of HCL is this absolutely wonderful human being, and with such a lovely, family. And as elders, we all learn. We all have, all have an Arjun, Purva, Shiven in our own families, and in each family that we have. The uncle, the auntie, the father, the mother is really, really special. So, at Emoha, we really would like that all of us, take this 1 hour out every day, because we're going to be bringing to all of you, from fun activities to spin the wheel to gambling, thought process, to everything that you can think of, so that elders can enjoy and the family could enjoy. Thank you so much. Please stay safe. Please stay secure and enjoy yourself. Thank you so much. Thanks, Purva.
Thank you.
Thanks, Arjun. And thanks to all the viewers who joined us. Take care.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.